Welcome everyone to MailFuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about Sunny, episodes 1 and 2 of season 1. This is an Apple TV show. It's a new show. It just launched today with the first 2 episodes. I was originally only going to do the first episode, but they're only about 30 or so minutes long each, so I just watched both to have a bit more to talk about and get a better idea of how I felt about the show. Because honestly, I wasn't sure how I felt after the first half hour, so I thought I'll watch the second one and see if it shakes up my feelings. I'll start spoiler free here since it is a new show and I can give some vibes before I get into anything in detail. But the premise of the show is that Rashida Jones plays a woman named Susie who lives in Japan, and she's been there for about a decade, and she got married there, she has a child, but the start of the show is that her husband and son were in a plane crash, and she is sort of left picking up the pieces afterwards. And much in how John Wick's wife sent John Wick a dog upon her death, her husband has sent her a robot. You see, it's a science fiction show. We're in the near future. It's not super sci-fi, but they've got these robots that they have as sort of helpers around the house. This robot's called Sunny, which is where the title of the show comes from. And our main character, Susie, does not like robots. She doesn't like machines. She's very, weird about it. I think she says in the start of the first episode that her mother, I think it was, died because of a machine, which turned out to be a self-driving car accident. But it sets up that, but the show as it gets going, though, obviously you've got her being reluctant to work with the robot, right, who just keeps trying to help her. So you've got that side of it, but it's kind of a thriller, though, because there's some other elements creeping in, mainly being the idea that her husband was kind of lying about what he does for a living and that there's something more going on. For example, she didn't really know that he worked with robots. She thought he worked with refrigerators. In fact, episode 1's called He's in Refrigerators. Episode 2's called Don't Blame the Machine. I just realized I never told you that, so it seemed like a good place to fire it in. But that's the premise. It's a bit of it's kind of a comedy as well. Slightly. There's definitely some comedic elements to it. Obviously, the shorter runtime makes you think it might be more focused on comedy. It's kind of a mishmash. It's kind of in this new era now where we can have shows that don't really fit the mold of the sitcom or the hour-long drama. It's something in between. I would say it veers more towards the drama just because it's a serious plot. It's got characters. It's got, it's not just all about comedy. She just happens to be kind of sarcastic and react to things occasionally that are a little bit funny. When she gets mad at the robot and swears and starts dropping F-bombs, it's usually at least a little bit amusing. So there's kind of a vibe to it. But there's definitely like a central mystery. There's a bit of a mystery box thing going on. And then you've got obviously the sci-fi elements of the robots and like, can she trust the robot? Is the robot genuinely nice and trying to help her? So on and so forth. Like, was her husband a bad guy secretly? Or was he a good guy doing just really illegal things? Or was he doing things he's supposed to do? There's a lot of questions that kind of come up. There's a lot of her clashing with her mother-in-law, who kind of keeps getting in the way early on in the first episode. So as far as how I feel about it, I'm in the middle, right? I actually felt less enthusiastic, but when I finished the second episode really kind of diminished my feeling overall. Not because it was terrible or anything like that by any means, but the first episode at least had some interesting ideas that kind of sprinkled in. The basic concept. I think Rashida Jones is the best thing in the show, which makes sense. She's the lead. She's also producing, I think. And she is carrying the episode. And it does an okay job of not being too depressing, despite the fact that this is a woman who's just lost her husband and son. Because it could very easily be a very dour affair. But it's got that kind of upbeat, melancholy kind of vibe going for it. It's going for something. At the end of the first episode, I was like, okay, I'm a little intrigued as to where this is going. But actually watching the second episode, I did get this feeling that the 30 minutes really is a bit of a weird format for this, because it feels like it's not a lot of time to get into as much depth with like a plot idea or with like a chapter theme or anything like that. So by the end of episode 2, I feel like, okay, they furthered everything along a little bit, and they've raised some new questions and built a little bit more into the mystery box by the end of the episode. Both the first and second episode have these little, like, oh, here's something you didn't know about that kind of makes everything seem a bit dark, or there's something more going on. And when it did it again at the end of the second episode, it didn't really have the effect on me that I think it was supposed to have as a TV show. The effect at the end of the second episode was like, oh, this is going to take a while to actually get to things. And part of this just might be my taste changing over the years. I'm not sure. But maybe it's just because it's shorter episodes, so I don't feel it was a good enough, like, full nutritional meal, if you will, aside from the teases of what's going on, that I find it a little bit unfulfilling. And I think the other thing is probably as well that a lot of the ideas that the show is dealing with, you know, none of it's particularly new, right? Obviously, it's got a specific lens on it. You know, there's a little bit of something like Big Hero 6 there. There's a little bit of anything where a main character's not trusted a robot. Think I Robot or Think anything like that. There's a lot of other science fiction that I can kind of see in this, right? And it's going for a slightly more upbeat kind of vibe to it. There's also a little bit of Severance in here, and all I mean by that is that when Rashida Jones visits the office where her husband worked, in the way that they're all very secretive and she can't figure out what he actually did during the day. It was making me think a little bit of Severance, and maybe that's just because the teaser trailer and the release date for season 2 of that show just got announced, so it's on my brain. But I couldn't help but feel a little bit of that sort of workplace vibe when she was at that building, so I was getting a little bit of that. So maybe that's just an Apple TV thing more than anything. I felt myself feeling a little mixed overall by the end of the second episode and not super enthusiastic. I think one of the things that stuck out to me is kind of weird. And it does kind of come up in the second episode a little bit more, and I was glad it did because it was really weird that it wasn't coming up at all. But this is a woman who lost her husband and her young son, like, you know, like a 5-year-old son or whatever age he was. And it felt like in the first episode, she just never really thinks about the son. Everything's about who the husband was. I've lost my husband. What was he doing with his day? And it felt like the son was an afterthought. It felt like you could just say that they didn't have a kid and it would affect nothing in that first episode, which is kind of strange. You would think the son would hit her arguably even harder than the husband would, right? Or at least equally. Episode 2, she does start thinking about the son a little bit more. The son's name comes up a few more times. It's clear she is thinking about him, but it did feel a little bit imbalanced to me, particularly to begin with. I mean, the second episode, I mean, we're not in spoilers yet, but I don't think it's spoiling anything to say the second episode has flashbacks in it that kind of set up how her and her husband met, and that's kind of, you know, as she's trying to figure out the secrets that her husband had, we're seeing the romantic encounter she had with them early on. They do an interesting little thing here, actually, where at the start and the end of the flashback, she kind of like says things from present day in the flashback where she'll say, hey, tell me your secrets, you son of a bitch. But then the scene will play out like it actually did, presumably, when it happened. And then there'll be like a little moment towards the end, almost like she's remembering this and she's in character, but then something reminds her of the secrets that are bothering her by the end of the scene, and she kind of comes out of it and like gives him a look or says something, not breaking the fourth wall of the show, but breaking the fourth wall of the flashback. So it's just a stylistic choice to kind of like interlink them with the present day story and what she's going through, and I kind of, you know, I can appreciate like what they're doing there. Yeah, I don't know if it's just a case of like I could do with either meteor chapters, or I could do with maybe more time just focused on the key premise of the show, which is her and this robot. I also don't know like how much I'm into the greater mystery of what her husband's workplace is, what's going on with the Sonny the robot, and all that stuff. Like some of it seems interesting, but to be honest, like I'm all for just exploring how she ends up getting along with the robot, to be honest. And I feel like it takes a back seat occasionally for other things to happen. So I don't know. I'm kind of mixed. I'm not feeling particularly enthused about checking out more episodes right now. But that's not to say it's bad, and it's not to say that there's not some stuff here that I think people may latch on to. Credit to the show for being maybe I don't know if it's the first that I've ever seen this in, but I certainly can't think of another show or a movie off the top of my head that has shown the shuffle. And by the shuffle, I mean when you're in the toilet and you realize, oh no, there's no toilet paper in here. It's ran out. And you have to shuffle to the closet or the cupboard where you keep the toilet roll, and you're kind of shuffling with your trousers down at your ankles and kind of shuffling down the hall. Yeah, that happens in one of the episodes here, and it gave me a good chuckle because it felt like such a slice of life moment that I feel like all of us at some point or another have went through it, probably a handful of times. Just whenever you've not quite remembered to stock up and put it into the bathroom, you go do the shuffle because you don't want to pull everything up before you've done any wiping. It's a whole anyway. I'm going on a bit of a tangent. And so I guess I'll say spoiler warnings here just so I can talk about stuff that's actually in the first two episodes, and if there's anything that maybe is going to be of interest. The first episode does open with kind of an ominous tease of some kind of accident. It reminded me a lot of something from the start of the movie Nope or something, where clearly there's an accident with a robot of some kind that's killed someone, and it's like, oh, we have to cover this up. But it's all very vague. You don't see a whole lot of things. It's a lot of like blurry POV shots and like quick shots of things. You don't really have a good context for what anything is yet. And as the two episodes progress, you get this idea that Susie's husband was not only a designer of robots, he seems to be involved in whatever this shady business is, this level 5 top secret stuff is. And that he was there and that he helped cover up whatever this was. And also, Sonny the robot was sent to her specifically. And the guy that claims he's from the company that delivers the robot doesn't seem to work at the robot company when she goes to the Christmas party in episode 1. So it seems like this is something that he set up outside of his line of work, and that he's probably put some secret code into Sonny. She's more advanced than the other robots. We find that out in episode 2. Like, all of this stuff is all right. Like, it's compelling enough, certainly. The stuff that's less compelling is that by the end of episode 1, it reveals that there's a shady character watching her from like an apartment across the street. In the second episode, he actually sends his own robot over to deliver the shoes from the plane wreckage of her husband's. And the shoes are focused on a lot in the first episode. In fact, on shoes, Rashida Jones in this show, at least in episode 2, is wearing these big, thick shoes. I can't even, like, you know, they're big white trainers, or sorry, sneakers for the Americans. But they're super thick. And I'm sure these are just a thing. These are just a fashion thing that have slipped by me, and I just don't know what they are. But they just didn't look very practical. Although she does break a window with one of them, so maybe that's why they're practical. They're practical in case you use it as a weapon or a entry device of some kind. But yeah, they reveal this character at the end of episode 1, and the shoes were really emphasized in the first episode. There's a whole thing where Rashida Jones can't remember when she's asked what her husband and son were wearing. The mother-in-law does a better job of remembering her, even though she wasn't there. She just had like a quick video call with her son, and she remembers more than she does. And it kind of like belittles her a little bit, and she's kind of like, hey, I'm a good mother, and I remember these things, and you'll remember eventually. Yeah, this whole, like, someone's watching her, who is he working for? The fact that he's sent in identical shoes to what the husband was wearing, if not, indeed, they're the actual shoes, it opens this door that the mother-in-law has been kind of hopefully peddling throughout the first 2 episodes, is that maybe, one, there's a chance that there's some survivors of the plane crash, which seems very unlikely, and Susie just kind of downplays that the second it comes up. But even the idea that she propagates in episode 2, what if they never get on the plane? Which would beg the question, where are they? So Susie also just kind of poo-poos that. But this ending with this shady character, like sending in the shoes, claiming they're coming from the airport rescue or search team, does suggest that there's a chance that him and the son were kidnapped by this group, whoever they are, and they're just being held captive somewhere, and they're toying with Susie because they want to learn something about his work, and they're trying to get it through her, but she doesn't know anything. Maybe they just want her provoked into looking for it. If that's what she spends like all of episode 2 doing, is looking through stuff. Especially when she's concerned that Sonny has like a lot of really specific programming. She wakes up when she's not supposed to. She's doing stuff that robots aren't supposed to do. She takes it to like a tech guy to check it out, and he's like, oh no, the code's all fine. In fact, this looks like a regular robot that gets sold on the shelves, but it's actually more advanced. This has stuff in it that's super high tech, and I can't make heads or tails of it. And the character that's there who kind of says, hey, there's like an underground kind of thing, there's like a sort of the dark user manual that lets you do stuff you're not supposed to. We don't even know who wrote it. It could be like a super secret top creator of robots, or it could be a robot themselves that wrote this thing. But when she shows her tattoo, kind of implying that this woman really believes in this kind of secret robot hacking world that she's in, it's something that Susie recognizes, and she keeps trying to find it in her husband's stuff. Like, she's seen that somewhere. She thinks it was on a drawing he did when he was young, and she tries to find that at her mother-in-law's house, and so on and so on. Her mother-in-law's too busy having a Christmas KFC bucket. Kind of specific product placement, but for some reason the phrase so-and-so brought a Kentucky Christmas bucket did get a chuckle out of me because it was so specific. So sometimes there's a way to get your product placement in, even being kind of on the nose, and it can be funny if you deliver it the right way. I don't know, give me a chuckle anyway. But so she's looking for all this stuff, and maybe that's all these bad guys want, is they want her looking through all this stuff so she can discover something, and then they'll get it secondhand from her. They'll because they're monitoring her, maybe they'll question her later and demand that she tell them what she knows. Because it's clear that he was up to stuff, and we see at the end, when we're back at the site of that secret room where there was an accident and the robot killed someone, presumably Sonny was the robot in question, because Sonny kind of has this as a dream at the end of the episode, which, you know, is she not going to question why robots are dreaming? Are they supposed to dream? Do the regular robots dream, or is this just a Sonny thing? These are probably important questions. But we see the husband actually has that symbol on his laptop, so, you know, it's kind of implied he is the master of the robots on the underground dark web, or whatever it may be. I mean, all that stuff is kind of, it's okay. It's not filling me with super amounts of excitement. I guess the whole idea of, like, oh, the husband had a whole life she didn't know about, so she's now looking into it. I guess that's a trope I'm just not that excited by ultimately. And I'm not saying that there can't be a great version of it that I could super get into, but I think inherently I'm just not excited by that initially, and unless they do something to really, like, sort of say, hey, this is what makes us special, this is what makes it compelling. And I don't think this episode ever gets that. I don't think the episode ever does anything wrong. I don't think the episodes do stuff that turn me away from it necessarily, other than just the pacing and the broad concepts just aren't really to my liking all that much. The whole shadowy agency that are watching her, I guess it's just not really focusing on the things that would appeal to me more about this story. And spending so much time in episode 2 focusing on the romance and how it started with the husband is much less interesting to me than developing the relationship with Sonny the robot. And I get that it's important, and it's probably going to be even more important as the show goes on, and it reveals more stuff about him, and about whether or not he was lying to her, about what his actual intentions are. Not with her, I mean, it seems like he did just want to be married and have kids with her. He wanted that in his life. But how did, like, what, you know, what's his goals as this super secret robot maker / secret hacker of robots, or whatever he is? Like, what is all that stuff? Is it, you know, it's I don't think that it was as exciting to me as just the premise. So episode 2 with the flashbacks, again, the flashbacks themselves are fine. Like, him helping her with the payment machine at a restaurant and taking her out for a drink and whatnot is fine. There's this whole scene in the first episode where it seems like it's establishing a new recurring character who I assume will come back. She wasn't in episode 2, but there's a bartender in episode 1 where Susie kind of opens up. She lies a little bit about the context. She doesn't say her husband was in a plane crash. She just says she broke up with her husband. And it kind of felt like this bartender was trying to flirt with her, because she was like, hey, I just broke up with my girlfriend, and I'm, you know, like, I'm alone too. I don't have anyone to go home to. It felt like she was trying to make the moves, but it was actually her that put the idea in her head initially that there's ways to get your robots to do things they're not meant to be. And this was the other reason why I thought she was flirting with her, is like, it feels weird to bring up that you had a girlfriend and you're lonely, and also mention that you get your robot to use a strap-on at home. It gets, you know, the other character asking all these questions about how you can do that. It felt like she was trying to put the moves on Rashida Jones, which, fair play, but you know, Susie's not in the mood, right? And to be fair, I don't think this bartender would have tried to flirt had she known that her husband and child had just died in a plane crash, or seemingly just died in a plane crash at the very least. She's coming at it from the context of she just broke up, maybe she needs a little bit of rebound fun. That's what she's looking at it as. But regardless, like, I mean, that scene is all right. Like, these scenes are fine. It's, yeah, honestly, the most I probably enjoyed the kind of the human to human dialogue and interactions, it was probably the stuff with the mother-in-law at the start of episode 1, where they established this translation device. It's kind of like the Star Trek Universal Translator, where she just puts like an earbud in and it translates all the Japanese so she can have conversations with others. And the mother-in-law says things in Japanese that are clearly almost as if Rashida Jones wouldn't be able to understand her, and Susie just is like, I'm still translating this. I can still hear you. That made me laugh. I thought that was actually like a really good solid start to the show. But they also established that there's a member of the Yakuza, or Yakuza to say it properly, at the this it's not even a service. It's like it's basically just like an interview process with all of the families of the various victims. They're collecting information about all this people who were on the plane and how to look for their bodies and things like that. So it's all very kind of dour. You look over to the left and there's just people crying at different tables and whatnot. Yeah, I don't think I've got much more to add really. It's the sort of thing where they play with a couple of different things. The idea that a video feedback loop makes the robot feel similar to being drunk, so that's something they employ in episode 2. It's I think it's the sort of thing where I can see how just with a few changes I could be really into this, but as it is, it's just not sparking my interest all that much. But which is not to say it's bad. I give it a try. It's only like 30-35 minutes for the first episode, so you can give it a try and see if you like it if you have Apple TV Plus. But I just don't feel like committing to this show after the first 2 episodes. I think I feel like I'd probably go through this and it would probably hover in a very similar fashion to how I feel right now. And I kind of did that with Constellation back earlier in the year, another Apple show, funnily enough, where it kind of peaked a little bit higher than what I initially felt, but it mostly meandered around the same feeling I had to begin with. Something about the streaming TV show format where they don't seem to quite improve in the same way that network TV shows used to, where they'd find their footing as they go along and they'd get better. And I think maybe that's partly because they kind of like do the whole season and they film it all, and other than maybe some post-production, they've pretty much done the whole season as a big movie and split it up for release. And I think the result of that is that usually if you watch a couple of episodes, you can feel pretty confident about how you're probably going to feel about the rest. Not always. I'm not saying there's exceptions and there's not exceptions to that. There absolutely will be. But I think by and large, they tend to be more consistent, both for better and worse, than like an old school network style show where they're kind of making it so a few episodes later they're kind of shooting new stuff for the next few episodes and so on. Anyway, if you watched the first 2 episodes of Sunny, do let me know what you thought in the comments. You can like, subscribe, all that stuff. Yeah. I'm losing my train of thought here. I was just thinking, is there anything else I should talk about? I never really talked about Rashida Jones finding the room and wondering why there's all these secret rooms and one of them's got some blood on it. I just don't have that much to say about it, all honestly, which I guess just shows how uncompelled I am with the mystery element of the show. So anywho, that's me. So yeah, thank you very much. You can support everything over at patreon.com/MaileFuzzTV and get some bonuses for your trouble. It helps me keep reviewing stuff and keep all the content coming, both here and over at MaileFuzz Movies. If you like science fiction, there's a science fiction movie podcast that I do with David, where we do a science fiction film every week. So go check out that. But thank you very much for joining. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?